I'm JJ. Welcome back. So I'm doing my part of my reading wrap up. I'm doing separate videos because I did a lot of group reads. But this month was, or last month I guess, was People April. And so I did a lot of reads for that. So I'm gonna just talk about them here. So I did read Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl, but that was going to be a separate buddy read video that I did, so I'm not going to be talking about it here, but I did read that. And also I had already discussed reading Feeding Ghosts, which is a beautiful, haunting, amazing graphic novel that is a memoir about this single family, but also corresponding with the history of China and stuff like that. So I already did this in my previous wrap-up video for earlier in April, so I'm not going to talk about that right now. But the last one that I'm not going to talk about at this moment very much is The Black Count. I haven't finished it. I'm doing this as a companion read for a group read of The Three Musketeers. So I will be discussing this when I discuss that. But some of this does come up with some of the books that I've already read that I do want to kind of highlight. But I'm not going to go into much detail of this. I'll do that later. So for the ones that I did read and will talk about, Defiance by Lubna Marie. She is a Syrian woman, and I've been reading a lot of books about Syria lately, especially. I really enjoyed Assad, or The Country Burns, or They Burn the Country. And that one was a good overall aspect of like the civil war that happened after Arab Spring, so in 2011, and then up until I think 2023, when they finally overthrew them. And you get to have this overall arching history in here, but the one that I read for People April was about, so Lubna was a woman who, so her mom and her mom and her dad were complete opposites. Her mom encouraged her to go to school, to learn. Her dad wanted her to, be traditional, easily controllable. The dad was very abusive of the mom, and the dad had power. He was high within the government of Assad, so they were raised to be loyalists to Assad, not just because of his position within his government, but also because they were Alawite Muslims, which is like a separation from the Shia, and a further minority within the Shia-Sunni continuous conflict. And so the fact that Assad himself was Alawite made all the Alawites, who were always the minority, really rally behind him and just see and protect and believe in him, because they didn't want like a Sunni leader anymore. They didn't want to once again be discriminated against and badly treated and stuff. So they were rallying behind him despite some of the horrors that he was causing and doing upon their people. But she slowly started to see the truth and want to believe in this revolution that was happening. And she started going to protests, despite the fact that it was so much more dangerous for her because of the family she was from. And because she was Alawite, the people that she was protesting with, a lot of them mistrusted her as soon as they found out. So the idea that you can be fighting against something and force the same thing, and still not be on the same side, still have this division, was really interesting to read. It's such a personal, very gut-wrenching story of the things that she had to endure, and how in that first year of this this revolution, what Assad, when he fought back, was doing to the country was actually, according to, I believe it was the UN, said that it was the worst human-made disaster since World War II. And a lot of people were not accepting these Syrian refugees, especially any of the Alawite ones, because they were assumed to be mistrustful just because of their previous loyalty or assumed loyalty to Assad. And so it's so good, but it is a hard read. Her getting involved with this revolution puts her mother at risk. Her mother ends up getting murdered by her own father, and she can never go back home again because of basically this all. She's so well known and so so it feels like such a more of a betrayal because she was the in group and broke away. They feel like she betrayed them even more than if, you know, the regular countrymen that were revolting. And so she had it from all sides of this distrust and this feeling of not being safe. She ended up becoming involved with an American Marine who was trying to help teach basically comic medic information to the people so that they could help all the people who were being injured during these revolutions and riots and all this stuff. And he ended up being one of them that got captured and publicly executed for his collusion against the Syrian government. So she just witnessed not only the regular atrocities of what was going down in Syria, but the very, very personal losses that she endured by taking a stand against it. And it's a very excellent book. I know I did not do it justice. Another one that I read was Montaigne by Stefan Zweig. And so I briefly talked about this in an earlier video, but what is fascinating about this is the fact that so many I guess philosophers in history try to temper the, I don't even know, the power of the emperors. So like Plato and also Seneca at the court of Nero. Both were there was Plato and the Tyrant was an excellent book, and Dying Every Day, which was Seneca in the court of Nero. That one I loved even more. Montaigne was an advisor to a king, did his job, got disillusioned by how little was being, done, or how little they listened, and so basically secluded himself and went into self-imposed exile for 10 years in his tower, reading, learning, thinking, and then came out because he went in thinking that his life was about to end, even though he was, I think, like 35 or something. And when it didn't, he's like, I guess I have more life to live. I better go out and live everything that I learned. And so he comes out, and his town people immediately want him to be mayor, and he doesn't want to, but he reluctantly does it. And then like he's reelected, so he must have did a good job. And he doesn't want to do it, and he's told by the king that he has to, so then he has to. But then he's asked by the king to once again be his advisor, and he tries to turn him down, and doesn't want to get involved, but he has to at least appease him a little bit. And so just all the people he knew, the things that he accomplished in his life, and just his thought process and about living freely, and learning and implementing what you learn, and growing and changing. And his idea of freedom was living freely, as in the way that you want to live, without being trying to change yourself for others, which was very interesting. And also the time period, I've always been interested in history and stuff, but this was after around what would have been like the Battle of the Three Henries. So you're dealing with and one of my favorite people in history is Catherine de Medici, her son Henry, and her son-in-law, because her daughter Margot married Henry of Navarre, were in a civil war, and I cannot ever remember who the third Henry was, but the Henry of Navarre was the one who ended up coming out ahead and taking the throne, and was a friend and confidant Montaigne was a confidant of him, so he's the one who wanted to be advised. So there's mentions of Medici in here, and just a lot of name dropping, a lot of old works being discussed, and having him think about it. And what's also interesting is, as small as this is, the guy who wrote it, Stefan, was fascinated by him, and the idea that once your life is over, the best thing you can do is essentially just die a good death type of thing, almost like the implied suicide. And the guy who wrote it did die by suicide after writing this book. So I don't know why I found that fascinating, but that was one of his reasons for becoming fascinated with Montaigne. So I thought that was interesting, that he would then want to spend time and effort on trying to understand that guy, and maybe in a sense understanding himself. And then the other ones that I read The Blue Stockings by Susanna Gibson, and that was a group read for this event. So I'm going to list all the names of the people who started or co-hosting People April. But so we read The Blue Stockings, and it was a group of educated, learned women who were basically going against society, and trying to continue to have these places where they could gather and learn, and have a society of bouncing ideas off of each other, bettering themselves and stuff. And the name for people who thought more of books than society and stuff, rather than like how society viewed them, became the Blue Stockings. And sometimes it was a slur, other times it was basically reclamation of wanting to have this kind of intelligent conversation and stuff, and finding your people. And so a lot of them, I mean, they were all privileged, but what you learn through a bunch of different people. I'm horrible with names and I didn't take notes on this page, but you get to learn each member's like personal story, and some of them I found a lot more interesting than others. I could never imagine. I think it was Hester. I'm not even gonna. Never mind. Don't quote me. But just how many pregnancies that she endured that were either she had miscarriages or like stillbirth, or children who didn't live very long, and just the strength that she would have to endure that kind of heartbreak over and over, and then also what it does to your body was intriguing and as well as gut wrenching. But then you also had one of the women who ended up having an affair, and then when she was able, she did leave and basically ran off with this, I believe he was like a Frenchman artist, and lived her best life, but was denounced by the Blue Stockings because they didn't want any of her scandal to bring down their movement. And I guess that was my frustration with this book, is not only did it talk all about these privileged women who had the means to do this. A lot of them then became writers, and yes, it was hard for them, and they did still have to deal with the patriarchy and all that, but they had a lot more means than other women at their time who had even fewer rights than they did. And instead of trying to advance them all, they were more just about themselves in a way, especially shown in the fact that they were so quickly to distance themselves from a former member. Even though she wasn't a prevalent member, she was still associated with them, and they didn't want to have that association anymore. So instead of helping a fellow woman who might have needed help or encouragement, or just a friend, they all basically cut her out. And it was hard to feel root for them when stuff like that was happening. And also it's so different from some other books that I had read, not this month but in the past, The Five, which is the five known victims of the Jack the Ripper, and how they were all poor. You still get a whole lot of Victorian society, and what was expected of women, the few rights that they had, what marriage was like, what expectations were like, what all that stuff was like. You had all of that, but from the common person, lower class point of view, rather than this is more from the upper class with a bit of wealth and some means, and some power to actually make a difference, and that they weren't then trying to be a movement for all women. But the other difference was reading The Woman They Could Not Silence, and that one was about a woman in 1860s, around that era, United States, whereas this is in the UK, where you get her being thrown into insane asylum by her husband because she was a learned woman, because she asked questions, because she sought knowledge, and so they saw that is the defiance was part of her psychosis, her, lust for knowledge was her psychosis. And so she was sent and kept in this insane asylum and had to try to fight her way out for her own rights. But in doing so, she also tried to free all the other sane women there. She didn't do it just for herself. And I think that's what frustrates me with this. And then the next book that I'm going to be talking about is that they seem to be wanting to advance themselves and their friends and not all of women around them. You did learn a lot, though, in the Blue Stockings about that time period, about, what marriage was, what the expectations of marriage were, and the health and medicine and stuff at that time. Like, you learned a whole lot of the everyday life of that time period. And that's the stuff that I found most interesting in that book. And so speaking of medicine in that time, I also read the Doctor's Blackwell by Janice P. Nomura. And that was an interesting book as well. So the Blackwell sisters, who became the first female doctors, they were American. They believe at least one of them went to Edinburgh, to Scotland, to learn medicine. But in this one, you get to learn about the history of medicine, how it grew and changed, how it was for women, and the chapter about pregnancy and women's health and the places that they put leeches where they did not belong, was very enlightening, and how they wanted to learn medicine, but these doctors, once again, they wanted to advance themselves, and they didn't want to, at first, didn't want any other women who might hinder their progress trying to come up the ladder. So they didn't support other women at first, and they didn't even want to go into women's medicine at first, even though women were dying rapidly from people who just were not understanding and the women's bodies. But they saw learning and being just a OBGYN or just a woman's doctor was beneath them. They wanted to, be surgeons and stuff like that. And they thought anyone who wanted to learn about women's bodies and women's rights and stuff were not worth their time, and were just gonna, once again, impede their progress. So they were not just unsupportive, but they were also very, very elitist. The way that they talked about other women, I did not like them as people, honestly. What was interesting was, so in the Black Count, you at first learn all about the Caribbean, the slavery in the Caribbean, and how everybody came for the sugar, and how sugar became the number one thing doctors used. They had sugar pills for everything, any kind of ailment. There was a sugar pill that cured it, and that was what medicine had been like back then. But then you had people like Florence Nightingale, who believed that women should aspire to be nurses, and they thought that was beneath them too, that they didn't like her movement. They didn't actually like and respect Florence Nightingale because she, once again, they felt was impeding their progress. What was fascinating was the fact that Florence Nightingale tried to get all women to learn. She wanted, women to learn medicine. And she also became more popular than them, which I think that the eldest Blackwell, Elisabeth, did not like. And another one that they did not like, and I have to read this book yet. I'm planning to read it probably for Q4. But Madame Restel, she was famous for performing abortions. And the fact that she comes up in the Blackwell story, and how they, just like a lot of people in society, absolutely hated her, and thought that she was giving a bad name to women as they were trying to climb this ladder. And another really interesting cameo in that was by the daughter of Putnam, who I had read about as the person who got Amelia Earhart famous. I read The Aviator and the Showman, and he was the showman who basically got her fame, got all the attention to her. She wasn't even one of the best or the first pilot. She wasn't even a pilot by profession, only by hobby. So she should have had no business doing some of the stuff that she was doing, which is ultimately what got her killed. But his daughter made an appearance and wanted to become a doctor. And so eventually the Blackwell sisters did not like the fact that there was women's hospitals being opened up, or women's medical schools being opened up that were just for women. They wanted them to have better education than being women teaching other women. They wanted to have the best and the best, and only the best allowed there. So then they eventually created their own school to compete with that. So once again, it wasn't for developing women. It was, well, I guess if we're gonna have to have women doctors, we better educate them ourselves with what we think is most important. So I just really did not like them as people, and it had a very some of that is kind of, I took over to the women in the blue stockings, and it kind of skewed my view of reading that, just because of how little they wanted to help all women, and just their own group of friends and people. And then the last one that I wanted to just briefly discuss, it's not one that I read, but along with, so the Black Count is about Alexander Dumas, the general. So the Alexander Dumas that we know, his dad Alex was a general, basically worked with Napoleon until Napoleon essentially was jealous of him and betrayed him, and he becomes the inspiration for the true Count of Monte Cristo. But there's also a lot of cameos in here, including since he was in the French Revolution, so he fought with and alongside of Lafayette. So I've been wanting to read The Hero of Two Worlds, because he helped in the American Revolution and then brought what he learned to the French Revolution. I kind of already got a little bit spoiled about what happens to him in this book, but I do want to read his whole story here, so that will be my Q3 Historathon reading. And then another really great cameo was by the Chevalier de St. George, which colloquially was known as the Black Mozart. And he was, the best swordsman at the time, very, very great violinist, and then a general in a black regiment within the revolution that Alex fought in. What's fascinating about this time period that I'll just talk about briefly, that was also mentioned in Feeding Ghosts, is in Feeding Ghosts, the Hong Kong and other, I guess, harbor areas with imperialism, you had a lot of mixing of races when all the rich white people came here and then slept with the women. And back in Feeding Ghosts, they said that majority of the women in that area were prostitutes, but you know that it was just them being, being raped by them and then being left behind. And now there were all these mixed race fatherless children, and they needed to do something with them. So they had this elite school for them. Her mother was one of them that got to go because her grandmother had a relationship with, I believe he was a Swiss man. And the experience is there where you're kind of the bridge between that color gap. You still have a lot of racism upon you, but you also have a lot of opportunities that the native Chinese did not have. And that idea, I didn't know much about that time frame or that area or that event in Chinese history. But then I saw that it happens a lot probably all over because of imperialism, but specifically within the stuff that I'm reading is what happened with General Dumas. So his dad was French. He was his own. He had a title and everything. He had different enslaved people over in the Caribbean, and one of them was Alex's mom. And so Alex is a mulatto, they called him, and when he was young, his dad eventually sold all of the other slaves that he had taken with him, so Alex's mom and all that. But he even sold, he waited and kept Alex for last, and then when he needed to get trip to back to France and didn't have the money, he sold his son with the intention of buying him back when he came into his possession and his inheritance and all that. So he did buy him back when he got back, and he lived a life of kind of privilege because the mulatto people there were very like the mixed race there in the mixed race people in Hong Kong during the Feeding Ghost story. And he got to do a lot of stuff that otherwise he might not have had access to. And people were fascinated by him. He's like 6 foot tall, very good looking, very strong guy. He is also a very great swordsman. He was a great rider. He was just this person that people were so fascinated by. And he eventually not quite disinherited himself, but he did not, when he was upset at his dad for his treatment, abandonment of his mother, he then enlisted in the cavalry, not as an officer, which his title and his name would have given him, but he took his mother's maiden name, which was Dumas, or his mother's name as his name, which was Dumas, and he then worked his way up from the bottom up, which is what saved him during the revolution, because they were killing everybody of rank because they assumed that all the officers and all these titled men were supporters of the crown. And so Robespierre and all the revolutionaries did not trust any man with a title or with rank. And so that very likely is what saved him. But then by his merit, people were fascinated with him. They respected him. He fought for what was good, and he was a decent human that it was really hard to look down upon, even in the midst of all this chaos that was brewing within the beginnings of the French Revolution. So that is where I am now. I didn't get to the point where he actually has to fight alongside of Napoleon and then becomes more famous than him by some of the people that they're oppressing. There is a story that was famous that he and Napoleon came, and I believe it was when they were conquering Egypt. They assumed that he was the general because he was this tall, good-looking, distinguished man that they assumed had power, and they overlooked Napoleon. So that's the kind of thing that Napoleon had to keep going up against. And probably also where the whole Napoleon complex came into being, because Napoleon's not that tall, but when you stand next to a 6 foot tall, strong black man, you look little in comparison. And so he was much more distinguished looking, and it added to the resentment that Napoleon eventually had towards him when he betrays him and essentially is ultimately going to be the cause of his death and downfall. So anyway, I'm rambling once again. I'm so sorry about that. But those were all of the ones that I read for people April, and the one that I need to finish, and the 2 that I have planned for later this year for Historathon. Anyway, as always, thank you and happy reading.